I'd like to introduce Konrad Matthaei. Konrad, welcome to the show.
The acting bug bit me early on in life, and so wherever I was and where I was able to act, I was pleased and thrilled to be doing it.
Where did you start?
No matter the size of the role or what the role was.
Did you start in like high school or before that?
I started in probably high school acting. I did some acting at Ann Arbor High School.
Right, you're from Michigan, Detroit,
yes,
outside of Detroit.
I lived in Ann Arbor, went to my high school years there, and then after that, wherever I was in school, I loved to do some acting when I had time to do it, take it away from my studies.
And what were you in school for when you went to, say, college or beyond high school?
I was studied English at Yale, got my degree at Yale in 1952, and did theater work there at the Yale Theater.
Oh, wonderful.
And then I did graduate work at the University of Michigan back in Ann Arbor to keep my family happy to be a Michigan
to come see
student.
You again, right?
That I did, I worked in, there was a professional acting company in Ann Arbor.
Okay.
And they would come around, they would hold open auditions, and I would audition there for some of the plays. And so I did quite a bit of acting then.
So wherever they would have you, you'd be there.
I'd be there.
You're in. You're in.
If it fit in with my life at that time.
Right. So you were back and forth between Michigan and the East Coast. Then.
Yes. Right.
Right. For a number of years, it sounds like. One of the shows that you were in that had, I guess, a big impact, from what I understand, was, and I think the title of it is Inside. No, that's not the one. Where are we going? The one with Katharine Hepburn. What was the title?
The title was A Matter of Gravity.
A Matter of Gravity.
It was one of my first Broadway shows.
Okay.
Actually, I produced that show. I wasn't an actor in that show.
Oh, wonderful. So you got to work with Katharine Hepburn.
I did indeed.
And of
she's
course,
a wonderful person to work with.
Yeah, I heard a lot of good things over the years about her, and of course she's had her place down here at the Shore in Connecticut.
Right.
Yeah. And what do you recall from that probably stood out at that time period?
Well, it was my first Broadway production, and I got to work with some very experienced producers, Robert Whitehead and Roger Stevens, and they produced a lot of things in Broadway at that point. And I was happy to be enlisted in aid in raising money for the production to put it on.
That's quite a job, just that alone, right?
It is.
Yeah.
They're always happy to have somebody who knows their way around the theater and who likes to go out and do the hard work of raising money and interest other people in what exciting production is coming up.
Because that's not just putting on a show. There's a lot of work that goes before that happens, right?
Right, exactly.
Right, and that's what that's part of the producer's job, I would take.
Exactly.
So you've done a lot of productions.
Yes.
I'm looking at an entire resume of productions. There's a host of productions here that go on for pages and pages here, it looks like. So a lot in the 50s, 60s, 70s, it looks like.
Yes,
So you
exactly.
did a lot of years in theater in New York?
Yeah, I did,
mostly
actually.
in New York?
I acted all over, on the West Coast, and I was on the East Coast doing summer stock before I got into professional theater and television. So as a striving actor, you take on the jobs wherever they are and where they will cast you.
Right.
And I was thrilled to be able to do that.
Right. And where were you living at that time? Were you actually living on the East Coast, or did you kind of have to live in a couple of places? When you were doing some of the Broadway stuff, were you living on the East Coast?
Broadway show, I was in New York by that time.
In New York.
I had my television acting career was still going strong, and but I was tapering off into production as well.
Okay.
And I had the opportunity while I was in there to partner in the purchase of a Broadway theater, which I was happy to do.
Oh, nice.
And so for several years, I was the owner of the Alvin Theater.
Does it still exist?
It still exists. It's very good theater. And we're in a wonderful number of productions we put on there.
That's awesome.
So I scattered all over the place, not quite in the order here.
No, and that's okay.
That's
we can jump around because that's how it happens, right?
Right.
When you're an actor, I think you kind of have to go from wherever you are to wherever they need you, and then back again if they need you again.
You go with the flow.
Right, right. So you had to be a little fluid with your where you were living, probably, and also what you were doing.
Exactly.
So you had to, so while you were doing theater, you were also still finishing film. or doing film at the time?
No, well, film
was
was
it
came
done
at the end.
at the end?
Journey Out
Okay.
of Darkness, I did my Australian film, which was done towards the end of, I forget what year we did Journey Out of Darkness.
Yes, and we have a photograph here of you from one of the shots I'll put up. Hold on one second. We'll find that photograph of Journey Out of Darkness. And do you recall
there
what
it is,
year
right
it is?
there.
Here we go. I love this shot.
There it is.
Can you guys get a good shot of that?
Sergeant Peterson. I
Sergeant
played
Peterson.
a lead role in Journey Out of
And
Darkness.
here's the postcard with the promo from it.
It was an exciting production because it had to do with the Aborigine in Africa, in Australia. And so we filmed many of the shots out in the middle of Australia, the outback, which it was called, which was wonderful scenery. And
What a great place to visit and be there, right?
And to work, yeah. And wonderful people to work with. And I had a very good cast.
Cast, yeah.
Cast work to
How long does it take to do, say, the movie Journey Out of Darkness? Like, how long would a movie like that typically take? Like, how long were you in Australia for the
I
whole
would say we did it
process?
for maybe 3 months. Total pictures.
Yeah.
And the editing could be done later, of course, after, but all the footage was shot within 3 months in Australia, the East Coast, and then Central Australia as well.
Yeah. It's one of my bucket list places to go, for sure.
Wonderful place to go.
And I love this picture of you with the hat. It's just very... Other things that I was looking at, you had Broadway musicals called The 13 Daughters. You have Don Amici,
Yes.
right? He was playing in that one, which I think is fascinating.
It was a wonderful show. 13 Daughters was written by a friend of mine, Bob Magoon. He was a very talented fellow and had done a number of things on Broadway. And he wanted to know if I would be in 13 Daughters, able to be. And I said, yes, I would be happy to be. And
Great.
it was a very good show, and it had to do with Hawaii and the early settling of Hawaii.
Oh, nice. So you get a lot of traveling in when you're an actor,
Yes,
don't
right.
you? Yeah. What would you say is the difference between acting on Broadway and acting in either soaps or film? What's the, like, what parts of it do you like the best of each one? And what parts, like, how are they different for an actor and also for a producer? I know that's a long question, but
an interesting question. And it takes different aspects of your character and talent, I think. But television in New York, for instance, is quite concentrated and highly competitive because there are a lot of actors there competing for these roles, and there are writers writing the scripts daily as you go along,
Right. Oh,
and
so
creating
it's a
the roles. So
continuous
it is
process.
continuous, and it's desirable to be on a continuing running show. It's a desirable thing to do.
right.
Because it's solid and you're well paid if you negotiate properly. And
Hopefully.
it's a lot of work, and you have to learn a new script almost every night for
the next day's shoot.
If you're lead character, as I was in several soaps, you have to be up for the whole week, 5 days of shooting. So
Is that like a 12-hour day? Is that an 18-hour day? Like, what does that look like?
well,
If you're actually the lead
apart
character
from-
in there.
Apart from the shooting itself, there's a preparation which you have to do on your own, and then there is a rehearsal. So you are given the script, say, maybe if you're lucky, you'll get a script for the whole week and if you're on 5 shows a week, then there are 5 scripts, and you maybe have a small segment in Monday's script, but a large one on Thursdays.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So you have to figure how to apply your energy and be in good shape for the Thursday when you have most to do and have less time to remember it.
Oh, right.
And so that was, I'd say, the television was a concentrated form of acting and focused, and you have to be very flexible and maybe somewhat less creative, but not a lot. And then
Not quite as much leeway, but still bringing the craft to the film.
And Broadway, working for a Broadway show, you had rehearsals. Say when you went to rehearsal, you had daily rehearsals. but for
that went on
segments
for weeks,
of the
right?
play that went on for weeks. So you would be rehearsing perhaps, I'd say maybe 18, 15 weeks of rehearsal.
Get
Or
it
months,
down
or maybe
pat.
out of town to get it out before you even presented it to an audience.
Oh, wow.
Whereas
Okay.
television, you rehearsed it and put it all together and had an audience for your new script the next day.
Boom.
But in
Yeah.
Broadway, you have a longer time to prepare. And you had a longer time in film work. You had a long time to study the script. You knew what the script was. That was
Right, because
settled.
it was already done. all the
Already
way.
done, and you
Right.
knew, and you got to know, if you didn't know the director, but he probably cast you, so he knew your work.
Right.
So you were able to study the entire script and do some research on the character that you may not have been able to do as much of on the Broadway character, but you still should have done a fair amount of
Some
research on the Broadway character in the play.
Right.
Whereas the soaps, there was not much time for that.
Right, you kind of
sort
have
of
to-
put it all together and say
On the fly, huh?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's a there's three very specific ways that an actor
Yeah,
has to
yes,
be, so
exactly.
to speak, in each one of those types of venues.
Yes, right.
How does this affect? You were married, had children?
Yes.
Okay. How does that affect having the whole family life when you're, now I got to go to Australia for 3 months? Or I don't know if
That
it
was the
happened during
longest-
that time,
yeah,
but
kinda, yes.
how do you work family in when you're an actor who's either on Broadway or in a film or in a soap?
Well, I guess
Maybe
as
some of
you're-
them wasn't in there. I don't know
you-
when you got married.
You see, I was married in '56,
Okay.
and
So that was early on.
early on
Right.
in my career, and I was just getting started, and I had done acting when I was in college and in graduate school before, and did a lot of summer stock.
So she
I
knew
came to-
already you were an actor and
Yes.
you wanted to pursue this.
Exactly.
Right.
So
So where did the family stay when you had different, I mean, did you have to uproot everybody?
no,
to
fortunately,
do that?
I didn't have to do that.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
And my wife worked, so that helped a lot. And let me see, family,
How many children?
3 children,
Okay.
3 wonderful children. And I had those children in New York, and I was living in Manhattan, not too far from the studio, so I could get on my motorbike and scoot down to the studio.
Oh, nice.
Usually for an early rehearsal, maybe starting at 8 or 7 or 8 a.m. in the morning.
Yep.
Work on it for the show that would, then we'd
Air
do
the
a
next
dress
day or
rehearsal.
whatever?
We'd
Yep.
do a dress rehearsal that same day. It made 10 or 11 o'clock, and then we would air the show, say at 2, whatever the showtime
my.
was. Yes.
What a schedule, huh?
So that was sort of separate. The family was structured separately, and they were going on about their own life in class or nursery school or wherever they were and doing
Yeah.
their thing.
So is this like something you'd be home for dinner?
Yes.
Kind of.
Yeah,
Oh,
kind of.
well, that's
You
kinda
could.
nice then.
That is
You had
good.
a real plus
A
there.
lot of work, dinner. Had to phase out while you spent the evening studying the script for the next day,
Right.
but home for dinner.
Well, that's kind of nice.
So that's
So
good.
there was a family life that
Yes.
revolved around, even though you had
The
that
television.
kind of
and
responsibility.
again, a little less so in Broadway, because Broadway there was no, if you were on stage from 8 o'clock, 8 p.m.
Right.
6 days a week, Monday through Saturday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you're on stage every night of the week, typically, on Broadway?
It depends upon-
Right, on the show?
Yeah, well, if the show is on every night, so
Sure.
the show gives 8 performances a week.
Right.
So if you have a
2
part in
on
a show,
Sunday,
it
right?
could be a very tiny part, and didn't have to be. You'd still be there for the whole show, probably.
Really? Okay.
But if you had a
If you're the
part in
lead,
the lead, you're
you're there all day and all night.
full time, and you're. Well, if the show is produced on Broadway, you're not there during the day.
Oh, just
once
every
it's
evening
open, but
performance.
it's the evening. Your workload changes to the evening.
And then for film, were you married and had children when you did the Australian?
Yes.
When you were in Australia.
And
Did
so-
they get to come there at all? Or
No time for that.
No.
I was
Straight on work,
straight
right?
on down, do the film, shot the work, and missed everybody, and
I
talked
bet.
to them on phone occasionally, but made the film happily, and then came on back.
Wow, okay.
But I was not a member of the family for a while.
Right, I guess not. Looks like your wife picked up the pieces on that one, right?
She did indeed.
Do any of your children have anything to do with theater or film, or
Well,
did they find any interest in it?
They have interest in it, but they haven't, not so far, none of my children nor my grandchildren. My son did for a while. Was thinking about it, and then he had other interests that came in. His priorities changed.
Yeah.
But I have no offspring
Currently
in show business.
How about production? None of that either.
No.
Neither actors nor producers.
No, correct.
No. So you're the lone star in the whole family.
Well, yes. Sometimes that's what it takes.
Well, and you know what? That's kudos to you for doing that. I think that's wonderful. I mean, you've done some amazing things. I'm looking through. I mean, your resume here has a page and a half of all the shows you've produced and all the theater that you've been in and the musical comedies. George M. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Do you recall?
Sure,
A lot about that?
George M. was a production of a terrific actor, Joel Grey, as George M. Cohan, and it really portrayed Cohan's life. And of course, we had to be able to rely on Cohan's music in the show as well. But
because that's a musical, right?
Give my regards to Broadway was there in that show.
I know that one.
It was a terrific show, and I had a very good partner. David Black was my co-producer on that, so he and I produced that. And it was a very successful show and ran a long time. And everybody was pleased with it.
Well, that's
Critics
important too, right?
And actors, yes.
Yeah. What would you say? I mean, if you had to pick, say, 2 or 3, I'll give you 3 even. What would you say were your top 3 in terms of either in all categories, or if you want to just pick one of each? What would you say is
Which
your favorite?
category?
Let's say for acting, what would be your favorite role that you had, whether it was on Broadway, in film, or at the soaps? What would you say was your favorite, if you had to pick one?
I'd have to think about
We're not
that.
gonna we're not gonna say anything bad about the ones that you don't pick.
Right.
We just want to know, like, if you had a favorite, either as you were doing it or as you were looking back on it.
I'd have to do a little research on that.
Okay.
To give you an answer.
Okay, that's fair. Fair question.
Yes.
You've done so much. I don't even know if you could pick a favorite. How about in production? Is there anything that you really enjoyed the whole production piece of it when you were doing it as a producer?
Likewise, I'd have to
Yeah.
say we talk about that in the next segment.
We're going to have to, I think, because you know what? I mean, I'm looking at it, I'm like, I don't even know if you could remember. I couldn't remember half of what I did if I did all this.
I know.
There's an awful lot here, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? You have some amazing things. Everybody's, and especially nowadays, you talk about actors and actresses and producers and all that. Is it difficult to keep a solid family foundation when you are an actor? And you have to do all that traveling, and you have to do all that stuff where you're away from your family for long periods of time?
You have to be committed, both to family and to the theater, to make it work. And it's not easy, but you can do it if you work and if your family agrees to it and your wife is on board to it. Yeah,
right.
She understands.
It sounds
but there's
like
a lot of demands have to be made, and doing things differently than normal normal people
quote unquote,
do.
right? Yeah. Well, I mean,
whoever they are.
Well, even when you just say the thing about having to go to Australia for 3 months.
Yeah.
Now she's mother, father at home. She's bringing the kids to all their things.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not
and
there at all.
shopping and doing all that
and all
stuff
the other things that have to go along with running a household.
Right.
Was brought down to one person. So
exactly.
It sounds like you had a wonderful wife too.
I did, absolutely.
And it sounds like you were a wonderful husband to her.
A wonderful, wonderful wife.
Yeah. And like you said, 3 great kids. So that's kind of nice. I think one of the things that happens, like when somebody is in a position where their job kind of almost has to come first in regards to their family life. It was the same way with my family. Our family had a business that kind of went around. Our family went around the business. When the business was open, we were all part of the business too. So that sounds very similar to what you had to do with your family.
I had 3 wonderful children, and I have 3 wonderful grandchildren now at the moment, and none of whom yet are so far immersed and inclined yet, but they may be changing their mind.
Do you talk to them about it?
Yes, if they ask me, I talk to them about it, even if they don't ask me.
Even if you don't ask, right? Well, you know what? If it was your passion for so many years,
Yeah.
I can't see how you wouldn't talk about it.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
I mean, this is something you loved.
Well, it's a wonderful opportunity. I mean, I think to be an actor and to give part of yourself to a role and expose that part of your nature that you might not otherwise do, but give enjoyment to people who really appreciate a kind of artist, the artist of the picture that you're creating, either whether it's on film or television or on
Or a play.
play.
Right. You know, I'll tell you, one of the things that I always appreciate about any of those types of things, whether it's Broadway play or even a small theater local, I love to watch the whole production. I just find it fascinating to watch actors that they can actually do that. Like, I would have a hard time being somebody other than myself.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's definitely a craft that I was not gifted with. And I look at it and I'm like always amazed at, like, yeah, because you really believe what's happening on the big screen, or you really believe what's happening on that
on stage. Particularly on stage, you have to make it believable.
I think, to me, stage is tougher than film.
It is tougher.
Yeah.
It is tougher.
You
Film you have a
agree?
chance, or film
you
you
can
have
do
a
another
chance to do
take.
another take on it. But
Right.
on stage, you got to get it right.
It's real.
And if you go through performance and say no,
Yeah, it wasn't so good,
the
right?
audience sees it, I don't believe that fellow or what he's doing there.
Yeah, it has to be
It
authentic.
has to be real. Make them believe it.
Right, right. And that's why I kind of like all that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when you were thinking about your whole life
Yeah.
up till today, and looking back, you've got a lot to look at because you've done so much. Is there anything different that you would have added to your life?
Maybe another film or two, if I had the opportunity, and I didn't because of demands, family demands, and work demands. But maybe another film because it was a terrific experience making Journey Out of Darkness in Australia in the outback, with a new cast of crew and cast of actors that I never had met before or knew, but making friends with them and getting to know Australia better was a terrific experience.
So you'd have another film in you if the opportunity came along?
Yes. Have you got one?
You know what? I'll start looking for you. How about that?
Okay, that's good, right?
You never know, right?
You never know.
You ask and you shall receive. Isn't that how that works?
That's
right?
Exactly.
Well, you know what? Today has been great just to know some of the things that you've done, because I find them all fascinating. And just knowing what someone does for a living is always interesting to me as well. Because I always kind of want to look at, like, what are we doing? How does this affect people's lives in a real way? Because it is a real way. You had a family, you had children, you had to live somewhere, and yet you found this passion, and you were able to bring this to the world in the way that you wanted to.
Yes.
And you were able to make that a living, which doesn't happen, as you know, to a lot of people. That's a blessing right there, right? So I mean, I look at it and I think, wow, that's great when someone can actually live their passion and live the life that they chose to live and have good success in it, you know?
Thank you. Thank you. It was a wonderful life and a wonderful career, and I enjoyed every moment in it.
It sounds like you did, yeah. I tell you, one of the things I think about when I look at someone who has done as much as you've done here is how interesting that you've had all these different roles. I mean, I know you remember them because we're talking about them now, but it's like when you play a different role and then you like, say, go to Broadway or you go to film, how long does it take to kind of like forget that role over there and then just become this new personality, so to speak?
Well, it's all in the process of the rehearsal period, and that varies. For the television shows, you don't have, as I said, a lot of time to rehearse there. But if you have a running part on a show, you develop that character as you go along. And so the 8th and the 10th or the 12th week or whatever week it was in, you have him pretty well refined around the edges. But it may take you a little while to get into there. But the important thing is at your audition, you have to have the producers realize that you could do that particular role that they have in mind and want a favorite role of theirs. But that's part of the casting. They say, he can do that, or maybe that fellow can do that, or this can. And well, let's just have those 3 actors come back for a callback.
Right.
auditions. But
How long do auditions typically take when they, like, say the initial one comes, you go to a casting call? Is that a 3-minute thing, or is it a, like, 20-minute thing for each one? What does it typically happen?
Television.
Like, let's say television. We'll start with that one.
Let's see, television is.
Because
You
they must
don't
have
get the script
streams
until
of people.
before, so you get. And there are streams of people,
Right.
and they have agents submitting them. So often their agents are
Pushing.
pushing, and they know what the author, and they may know who the author of the next material is, and they may know the producers of the television show very well. But
So there's some little political stuff that can happen
a little
as well,
bit,
right?
and the producers and the director will say, well, I know from William Jones' agency, for instance, they have good people and they know what I'm after here. So let's look at the 3 people that he's sending
That
here.
they're bringing in,
That they're
yeah.
bringing in. But have to be flexible.
Yeah. And over these many years that you've been involved, and now you're seeing things that are happening in the world now, what would you say has been the biggest change that has happened since, like, say, the 50s and 60s to today, let's say in the last 10 years? What would you say is the biggest change in the industry?
That's a tough one. The biggest change.
Because it seemed very, to me, I'm just thinking back to when I was a kid, it was very innocent back then. You know, there was a lot of innocence in the world back then,
right.
in the world itself. But then TV also picked up on that same thought process and how society was. And now it seems to have shifted. Would that be something that you would think is part of it, or is that not necessarily even a piece of it?
Not necessarily.
No. What would you say? I mean,
Is
you
what?
have a bigger perspective than I do
On what?
on how the industry itself has changed. Like, maybe good and bad. Like, what parts are really good that have changed over the years in the industry? You can just pick one if you want to just pick film, or if you just want to pick Broadway. I don't know how familiar you are with some of the last 10 or 20 years of any of those.
Well,
Or maybe soaps. They're still on,
I think there's
right?
on Broadway theater, there's a broader receptivity for the audience. They are exposed and willing to look at more things exposed, like Hamilton, for instance, is a remarkable show that a big smash, and still is, I think, on Broadway.
Yes.
But so much of that had to do with the foreigners coming to the early country, and Hamilton being such an important part of it. But he came from an island and spoke very little English, I think, when he came.
Right.
And so to have that kind of a whole picture and story unfold on stage today, I think is unusual but exciting to see.
What's different between, let's say, back then with film? What would you see as a big difference? I can see that on Broadway. That's actually an excellent observation.
Yeah.
Because certainly films have changed a lot.
They have.
the years.
They go all over the map, I think, and so and they're so flexible. They can just go and get a little snapshot of this and that and make a whole attractive feature out of it. So, but I don't.
Do you think it has more to do with technology, or does it have to do with the way the progress of the actual industry itself?
I'd say the technology probably.
Yeah, because technology has allowed us to do things like put a backdrop that you weren't there and you're in it,
Right,
Those
exactly.
kinds of things
Yeah,
that they
right.
couldn't do in the 50s and 60s. Or I like the way Walt Disney first started. You know what I mean? You see how cartoons were made, for instance, how that has shifted. You know what I mean? And I just always find that fascinating, how they've been able to change so many things that 20, 30 years ago you couldn't even do that.
Right.
Right.
I think we've earned a water break, don't you?
Oh, let's take one. Yes. you need one too, right?
Here.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You can go right ahead. Oh, that's good water. Thank you very much for that cue.
And it's wet.
And it's wet, yes. Well, one of the things that when we talk about, how the industry has changed, even soap operas today, as we call them still, right? They have changed an awful lot.
But you don't hear people talk about soap operas as much today, I don't think.
Not as much. I think, what would you say is the biggest now? Film, soap operas, or theater, like live theater?
Well, I'm partial to live theater being the most important and more direct, but I have to say television probably makes the swiftest and broadest impact.
Yeah. And what about big films, like blockbuster films? They didn't have that.
Didn't have that then.
Right.
No.
That's totally changed, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. What was Godzilla or King Kong was probably the biggest hit back, and the things that they could do on TV back then or on the big screen is completely different from the things that they can do now with that, which I think is interesting.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It is.
With the different people that you've acted with over the years, I know we talked a little bit about Katharine Hepburn earlier. What do you think you recall the most about like that whole experience or working with her? Do you recall any of the things? I know you said she was a very wonderful person to work with. I think that's nice to hear as well.
Well, Tallulah Bankhead was particularly fun. Tallulah, I worked with her in Matter of Gravity, I think the play was called.
Okay. Yep.
And she always called me Matt, so she would always, when she needed something, it's like, Matt, where's Matt here? She would make it this.
She gave you your nickname, huh?
Yeah, nickname. But she was a wonderful person to work with. One of the old stars.
I do recall the name. Yeah, I do recall the name. And I have not seen the play.
And Albert Finney, of course, was terrific to work with, too.
Oh, yes.
In Luther.
Yeah. Are there any of the people from either co-stars or people in Broadway or that you've stayed in touch with over the years?
Not particularly.
No. Because of distance, or just
distance, really. Worked with them, had good relationship when we were working together, but then you go on to other things.
Right, and they did too, right?
Other shows.
Right.
Other places. Other things to do.
Other things to do, right?
Yeah.
There's always something else to do, isn't there?
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about? We had talked briefly about George M. And you said your friend wrote the. Was it your friend that wrote the?
No, George M. Cohan. That was based on the Cohan book.
Oh, that's right. Okay. There was another one that you talked about that a friend of yours.
Robert Whitehead, Roger Stevens, and Robert Whitehead, famous Broadway producers. And that was the Katharine Hepburn show, A Matter of Gravity.
That was the Katharine Hepburn one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think I did other shows with Bob and Roger.
So back to A Matter of Gravity, it looks like March 1976 it came out, inside the playbill, and it was at the Broadhurst Theater.
Yeah.
Right? Robert Whitehead, you said. Yep.
That was Katharine Hepburn starred in that show.
That was the one with Katharine Hepburn, right.
Directed by...
And did you ever play piano or sing or do any of those talents on stage as well, or do you do them just...
In 13 Daughters I sang.
You did?
And it was a musical, and I sang that. So if there was a musical, I'm not sure how many musicals. I did musicals in stock, of course I did. So I used my musical talents there and singing.
And you still do that today for pleasure?
Yes.
Right?
And I still play the piano, too. But I didn't play the piano in any production that I recall.
No, that was just something you do for fun, right?
Yes, right.
Right. Would you be willing to sing a favorite tune? A short little clip of it?
No.
Is there anything that you...
Don't know that I have one.
No? Okay. I mean, there's obviously, it would be a cappella. We don't have a piano here, but I'm not a good singer, so for anything you did would be fabulous to me. So I wouldn't be judging anything, believe me. Is that too much to ask?
But others might not agree with you.
Well, that's their problem, right?
Yes, right.
Well, if you can sing and play the piano anywhere else, I'm sure you could do it here. But I won't pressure you.
No, but we have to have one to do it on.
This is true. We don't have the piano, so I guess. But was there like over the years, did you do things like when you were home with your kids? Did you sing and play the piano like at Christmas?
Yes,
or
of course.
those kinds of things?
Always did that.
So you always did
Always
that.
did that.
Well, that's
Had to
a
do
wonderful
that.
talent.
Well, it's
Not everybody
one
can
to-
sing and play the
to
piano.
share
That's
when you-
two things at once. I can't even do one. So.
But I had musical background. I studied piano for
Oh.
almost maybe 20 years, actually,
Oh, so
studying
you have
lessons.
professional training.
Yes.
Okay. So it wasn't something that just came naturally.
No.
You actually worked at it.
That doesn't come naturally.
Right.
And good professional singing doesn't come naturally either.
Right. That's work too.
Training,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
training.
Yeah. Let's switch gears. Let's go to Shakespeare.
Okay.
What would you think, the theater Shakespeare, what would you say was, stands out in your mind about that?
Well, just the privilege of working on Shakespeare's work, it was a marvelous challenge and a great gift. And being president of the American Shakespeare Theater for, I think, 5 years was a particular satisfaction. I'd begun to do less production on Broadway and less acting, and so that my managerial skills were called upon. And,
Sounds like you had plenty of them.
I don't know about that, but we had particular challenges to do. The Shakespeare Theater at Stratford was not doing well financially.
Oh.
And we had to attract a different kind of an audience to make it do better and earn enough money to pay our rent. It's a beautiful
Keep it alive.
facility as it was, keep it alive, keep the shows going, and that cost a lot of time. Had to organize a board of directors and hire people and hire the right actors and get the right directors there, all of which I was happy to be able to do.
Well, you are certainly multi-talented when it comes to
Well-
this whole industry, not just in the acting part, not just in the production, but
We have
when
to
you had
choose
to
the
do
right
all
people.
that.
Have to choose the right people, and Michael Kahn, fortunately, was a wonderful director, and he came in and we did a lot of good work together at the Shakespeare Theater.
And this is
in
part
New
of what you had to do in terms of that was also with fundraising, similar to what you did in New York.
Yes, when I was
at theaters,
producing in theater too.
being
yes.
able to bring in some
Yeah.
money to keep things.
But you attract a
rolling.
different kind of investor because the summer stock investors, they say the Shakespeare was, they like to go to the summer shows and a different kind of audience there. And but on Broadway, the audience comes and the people like to invest so they can get their money back.
Right.
They want to make
They wanna
money
make
on that
money.
show.
It
Yes.
isn't just a donation, right?
Yes, right.
Yeah, yeah. It's not just a feel-good kind of a fundraiser.
Right.
There's got to be something on the other side of
Return.
it, right?
Gotta
A
be
return
a
on their
return.
investment.
Exactly.
Yeah. Is that theater still in working right now? The one in Stratford?
Stratford?
Do you know?
I'm not sure that it is.
Okay. I don't know either. That's
Yeah.
why I'm asking. Yeah. I don't know. That
It should
is.
be, but I'm not sure that it is.
Yeah. And how long? You were 5 years
5
as the
years there,
president.
yes. Mhm.
And how long was? Do you know how long it was before that? That it had
Oh,
been
long
in,
years.
long years in,
I think
in existence.
maybe 30, 35 years.
And I'm sure after you as well.
Yes.
Other presidents took
Yeah,
over and
they
that
did.
kind of thing. So we can always check that out, right?
Yeah.
Find out if there was more to the story, as they say. Well, it sounds like you kept it going for quite
Tried
some
to-
time.
tried-
Not only
tried to
as
do that.
Yeah, not only as the president, but as the person involved in the fundraising and keeping it alive, so to speak, as they say. Do you do a lot of humanitarian work in Augustine, Florida? You also do some.
I did. There was not. There were interesting. My musical talents came forth in St. Augustine, Florida, when I was living there just a few years ago.
It's a lovely place, by the way.
A lovely place,
Yes.
and they survived Irma very well.
Right.
Although it was
Yep.
tough.
Yep.
But I had the opportunity of singing with the St. Augustine Choral Society,
Oh, wow.
and we
Was this
had
for a
good
relief
directors.
fund in that regard, or was it just
It was not
part
for
of what you
relief
did?
fund. It was
No.
just concerts that they did, concert seasons they do periodically throughout the year.
Oh, nice.
They had very good conductors and very good variety of vocal singers. And I was pleased to be part of that. And it's the oldest singing group, I think, in St.
Wow.
And but they have tough cobblestone streets there.
Oh, really?
And that's where I tripped and fell in broad daylight and
geez.
broke my leg.
Oh.
So-
That's a recuperating time.
It is recuperating time.
Yeah.
Anyway.
My sister had some it just that little bit that she had to have done. It's like it took months and months and months.
It does.
And I'm sure it did for you as well. That's
It
tough.
did. But it was a great opportunity.
I bet. I have another very interesting thing that I know about you. Back in Michigan, many, many years ago, there's a golf course.
Oh, yes.
Tell me a little bit about how that happened with you and your brother's names intertwined with the name.
Oh, how you're up to date in
And
things,
your
aren't
dad,
you? You really
and
are,
your
yes.
dad kind of spearheaded something that really wasn't as known about, or it wasn't the common way a golf course was normally put together
It
back
wasn't
then.
put together. He was an unusual fellow, my dad, and
Sounded like it.
great philanthropist and a great industrialist and a fine Detroit leader of Detroit. He was a wonderful guy and a wonderful mom, so I had wonderful parents, and they together bought some property. My father's business was in Detroit, Michigan, auto parts business.
Okay.
And he bought some land near Ann Arbor.
And this was a part of a quarry or a
Well,
piece
it was
of
a gravel pit.
A gravel pit, okay.
Gravel pit, and bought some land over the years, and as he was able to, bought more land, and as we were growing up there, my brother Fred and I, and so that was our summer job. Make this place look beautiful.
Make it look good, huh?
Plant those trees, plant that corn, harvest the corn and the wheat, and get out there and turn it into something. And it was called, Mom and Dad named it Radrick Farms. That was the first syllable of my name, the second syllable, and my brother's
Frederick.
name, Frederick, so Radrick. And he gave, when he retired, he gave it to the University of Michigan, and it has now become the Radrick Golf Course at the University of Michigan.
So it's owned by that's wonderful.
It's owned by the University of Michigan now. And
But it's a public?
It's public, yeah,
yes.
university. So, and it's beautiful. And
they had a couple of pictures that I looked at on the web, and I just thought it was wonderful how they really incorporated all the indigenous trees and everything that was supposed to be there already as part of the grounds. And
part of all members of my family have been working on it, and my niece, one of my nieces, my three nieces, my brother's daughters, worked on it and it turned it into just a month ago.
Oh, really?
Dedicated a bike trail from Ann Arbor, which is about 5 miles away from where this property was. And the property was at Matthaei Botanical Gardens, and so they had a nice dedication there just 3 weeks ago.
Oh, wonderful.
So
are you able to fly out there at all when they do things like that? Or
I wasn't able to go for that, but it was nice.
Yeah.
But Morgan Matthaei Crowther represented us there, and
how wonderful!
Wonderful job.
So the family still is doing a lot of good for the community.
Trying to do that, and good for the arts.
Things, right. Is your brother in theater, or was he involved in any?
Less so in theater. He was musical, and he fortunately or unfortunately passed on to the next phase of his everlasting life.
Oh, I'm sorry.
A year ago.
Oh, wow. Was he your younger brother or older?
Older brother.
Older brother.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I joked with him, why would it become named Radrick when it should have been Rick Rad?
Rick Rad.
But
I saw that in there. I couldn't decide which way, but it sounded better the other way, right?
Right.
You got first billing.
Yeah. Managed to get in there.
You got in there somewheres, right?
Right.
Well, it sounded like a really wonderful, not quite philanthropic, I can never say that word right. Philanthropic, but more of a community type of endeavor that your family was really a part of in that whole area.
And what made this,
and continuing.
You touch your finger on it exactly, because this bike trail, which was dedicated to my nephew, in nephew's honor, and it ran from Ann Arbor about 7 miles in back roads before it gets to the actual
property?
Botanical Garden property farm, which is part of the University of Michigan. But so that drew those communities together and made
nice.
it accessible so they could come out as a family on their bikes
Right.
and ride through there and enjoy this environment and the scenery.
Right, and that's always nice too. Does Morgan have a nonprofit that she works with out there, or is it all just family things?
No, it was largely family things. And we're working
Were
with
you
the system.
athletic back in the day, like the bike? When you're talking about the bike trail,
Yes.
you're talking about golf. Like, was that something that was kind of big in your family, or?
Not necessarily,
No.
but bike trails are something today people do. A lot of
I
the
love it.
families do. Yes,
Yeah.
you
yeah.
would enjoy it.
You know what? I'll have to get out to, now that'll be on my bucket list too
Okay,
now. You're
good.
giving me all these things I need to go to, Australia, Michigan.
Yeah, you can handle it. You can handle it
Well,
all.
I could probably do that, right?
I think you could.
I just can't do the acting part or the producing part.
You could probably do that too.
Well, I don't know about that. I enjoy people's stories. I
Yes.
enjoy hearing how people have lived their lives and what they found to be their own sign of success for their life. And it sounds like you've reached the pinnacle of what that could be for your life, because
Well.
it seems like, from what I'm hearing, everything that you had wanted to do, you've done, and you've enjoyed it. And to me, that's a sign of success. It's not all about, making $20 million. It's
Right,
more about, did
exactly.
you live the life that you really wanted to live?
And done something for other
And
people
done
as well.
something to
The-
help
the
your life,
community.
your community, your family,
Yeah.
your extended family, like
Yes.
your nieces, and how these things all are interpreted as a person is how you want to be maybe thought about. What would be like how you would want to say your legacy to the world is the way you've lived your life,
Exactly.
and what would be how would you want to be remembered for all time? Let's say.
Right. Well, that's sort of how I would like to be remembered. As being
As
just
all those
something,
things.
all those things, and
Right.
trying to do something and encouraging your family to be involved in it as well.
Sounds like they are.
They are. They are indeed.
Your son and daughter, son and two daughters?
Son and two daughters.
Two daughters,
lost
right?
a daughter 2 years ago.
Oh,
But son and daughter are very active
Sorry.
now and working very hard. Son's working in Michigan, and with his son at Yale,
oh, okay.
and
So the whole family has been always involved in a lot of different things.
yes,
Like you've had some interest in community, in making things different for a community that are long lasting, like your dad's legacy with this golf course.
Yes.
And now Morgan's with the Matthaei Botanical Gardens.
Matthaei.
Matthaei, I'm sorry. Matthaei Botanical Gardens. You know I was going to mess that up, right? We're going to start just calling you Maddie.
No,
Like Tallulah did.
Tallulah did that. Matt, she said Matt. Yeah.
Matt, yeah, right. But the Botanical Gardens, how big of an area is that?
About 800 acres.
Wow.
Well, the botanical garden itself is smaller, but it's tied in with the golf course, the Red Lake Golf Course that I told you about.
No kidding.
So the total was 800. But it was
That's huge.
environmental development, since it was all gravel pit and abandoned farmland.
Well, and even when I was reading a little bit about that, the way that they put together the golf course, it had to do a lot with the sustainable things and the water and the drainage. And like two years ago, they got an award, some kind of environmental award with the golf course.
Yes.
And so that's something that people didn't think about, when that was built initially, obviously. But like those kinds of things back then were not things that people think about. They think about them today,
Right.
but they didn't think about them back then.
Right. Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So one of the things that I'm okay.
Yes.
They're talking
You
to
can
me,
do it.
sorry.
It's all right.
I'm sorry. So as far as you personally, what would you want to be remembered by in terms of, I'm going to say, who you are? I know you've done all these wonderful things, and I think they're wonderful too. But on a personal, like, as a person, what is the thing you would most want to be remembered for?
I suppose someone who is given of himself for the enjoyment and growth of others, and encouraging others to give of themselves to the community, and those things would be important to have it.
And you've literally lived that, it seems.
Tried to do that.
Right.
I have a daughter who's doing very good things in Florida, in St. Augustine area, and she's giving back to her community there. And my son working very hard. And
back in Michigan, right?
He's in New York.
Oh, he's in New York. Okay.
Very hard.
Okay.
And but they both give back to their community and to their associates. And
does your daughter in Florida, is she part of the nonprofit world?
Well, she was an important part of the laboratory there, this wildlife laboratory in St. Augustine.
Okay.
And she was on that board for a number of years. So
a lot of environmental concerns then.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Which it is our planet after all, right?
It is. Got to take care of it.
Somebody's got to take care of it. Clearly, right? We're glad that people have that interest, you know what I mean? So we're almost at the end of our time, and
yes.
I don't know if there's anything else that you would love to say, but I would certainly welcome that. If not,
thank you for your kind interest, Shirley.
Yeah.
And appreciate that and your well-phrased and directed questions.
Well, you're welcome.
And keeping the ball rolling.
Yeah. Well, there's so much here. I could probably do another hour, but I don't want to bore everybody on my side, because what you have is so fascinating. There really is that much. And I just think it's amazing when someone has what I'm going to call a life well lived. And,
thank you.
And lots to be
thank
proud
you.
of.
As you
that's
do,
what I think you have too.
Thank you. And
as your family.
I think you do too.
Well, thank you. And I'm really grateful that I was asked to be the host to this program and to have met you today and to be able to look through some of your history on what you've done in this lifetime is amazing. You know, really, when you look at it.
Thank you for your intelligent and thrusting questions.
Well, I hope they.
Caring.
I'm not going to make you sing, so
Good.
So at least we can close with a nice note, right?
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for being part of this program and being part of today.
My pleasure.
And it was wonderful to have you here.
Thank you very much.
And I loved all your answers, and I just am fascinated by what you have done. And so I want everyone to
Shirley.
Say another little thank you to Konrad for being here today, for being as open and forthright with everything that he's said about his life and his history and all the things that you've done here. So.
And they're all true.
And they're all true. Not one lie in there.
Thank you.
No, we love that.
Thank you very much.
We love that. Thank you much. Okay.